This episode of The Capsule in Conversation is brought to you by Harrogate Springwater. Famous for its waters since 1571, Harrogate is Britain's premium natural source water. Hello everyone, you are listening to the Capsule in Conversation podcast. I'm Natalie Anderson and today I'm talking to journalist and author of the Sober Girl Society Handbook, Millie Gooch, as we discuss the impact of drinking culture within female friendship groups and the movement towards long-term sobriety. So take a minute, settle down and get ready to join us in our conversation. Hello all, thank you for joining us. I hope you've all had a great week. I am very excited for today's conversation as I've been following our guest for some time now. As the author of the Sober Girl Society Handbook, she has been among the first of a new generation of sober curious young women who've been documenting their journeys with alcohol abstinence online. Subsequently, she founded the Sober Girl Society movement, which has amassed over 125,000 followers on Instagram and hosts meetings and events across the UK for like-minded women wanting to explore their relationship with alcohol. I am so thrilled that she's been able to join me today. It is the wonderful Millie Gooch. Hi, Millie.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much for having me. I always get so embarrassed when people do introductions for me. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's because when people are like reeling off your achievement, you go, oh. Yeah. You get a little bit embarrassed.
Yeah, every time. I've still not got used to it.
I'm so thrilled that I've been able to get you on. I mean, we've been after you for quite some time with our podcast, just because of all the incredible work that you've been doing. I think for me, you were probably one of the first people that I spotted on Instagram in particular that was really championing the movement towards sobriety particularly within young women. I grew up in like the 90s and the early 2000s, and the culture was so different then. It was like try and drink the boys under the table, and if you weren't kind of keeping up, or you weren't very fun, you were a bit of a lightweight, you were a bit boring. And then to see somebody like you really kind of championing why would you want to get yourself in a state? It was amazing. I mean, you've written so many incredible articles on this, but you've also had your own journey, haven't you? Which is kind of what started you off on this path.
Yeah, 100%. So I kind of had like the similar upbringing really. And it's interesting because I my drinking kind of didn't start that young. I know in British culture, a lot of people's does. And you know, all my friends are like 14 drunk at a park. But for many reasons, I actually didn't really start drinking until I went to university. And when I went, it was weird because I always look back now and it just wasn't even a choice. Like it wasn't, oh, am I going to start drinking when I go to university? It was just like, that is what you will do. Like I remember my freshers pack had like a shot glass in it. All the kind of like first week activities were like, oh, pub crawl. And it was just all revolved around alcohol. So I kind of started drinking when I went to university. And I always say, I think because of that, I never, not that there is like a proper way to drink, but I never had a few drinks here and there. I just went from being a nothing drinker to like a 3-4 night a week go hard or go home drinker. And when I started uni as well, it was just when like Geordie Shore had come out.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was like, yeah, like real, it's like height of popularity. And we just used to think they were like amazingly outrageous, like they didn't care what anyone thought. They just would go out and, you know, get absolutely mortal. And we fully modelled that behaviour at university. And, you know, everyone was doing it. So it just felt so normal. But then kind of after university, everyone else seemed to slow down and I just seemed to get a bit worse. So I kind of went to work in fashion, I went to work in PR, and a lot of the agencies that I worked for also looked after booze brands or had like, you know, affiliations with booze brands, things like that. So it was always free booze everywhere. And my drinking just started getting steadily worse. And I think it turned from something without me even realising that it was something that I just did because everyone else did, to then something I felt like I kind of needed, whether that was for like confidence, to be sociable. I'd never, when I was really young, thought, oh, I need alcohol to have fun. But it kind of got to a point where I was like, oh, well, why would I go anywhere if I wasn't drinking? And then it kind of got a bit scary. You know, I'd like wake up in places that I kind of didn't want to be in. I would fall asleep on trains and end up in like Dover and have to get like £200 Ubers home. And then I started really noticing the effect that it was having on my mental health. So I used to really black out quite a lot. I'm quite small. I drink very quickly. And I would just not remember huge portions of my night, sometimes like 5-6 hours, sometimes not remembering how I got home. And the next day I would just get that like intense fear of, what did I say? What did I do? Did I embarrass myself? Does everyone hate me? Yep, everyone definitely hates me. And that kind of like would start to permeate my entire weekend. I would spend my entire weekends like really hungover, not productive, not doing anything, not seeing the outside, eating Domino's pizza for breakfast, and then just got into this cycle of just doing it all again. So like I'd start to feel normal by like Wednesday, Thursday, the kind of shame had dissipated slightly. And then I'd go, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get drunk. And I just did it in a cycle for years until I was like 26. And I went out on a night out with my friends. I remember there was a lot of tequila. That is pretty much the extent of it. I woke up the next morning and I just felt absolutely horrendous. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. And it was not as easy as that. There was a lot of like reading books. There was a lot of like meeting people and things like that. But after that day, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I 4 years later, here we are. I'm now 30 not drunk. It was my 4-year sobriversary last week.
Which is amazing. Congratulations on that. And because it is an achievement, it really is an achievement. And I know that, your story is not extraordinary. Yeah. For many people, that's general. Anyone that's probably listening to this was like, oh yeah, I've done that. And we've all done that at some point, and I can say like I started drinking relatively young. In the industry, I think you grow up quite quickly in the entertainment industry and you're seen quite adult quite quickly, and therefore you act quite adult quite quickly. And the same thing, sneaking off to the park. Not necessarily, I didn't go to the park, but we definitely made ourselves older than we were to get into clubs and things when we were probably 17. And it stemmed from there. And I think, but that is not uncommon among young women and young men as well. It's really not uncommon. I think, and the freshest thing that you said, that's the culture. You get there and you're given like so many drinks. I worked in a £10 all you can drink pub at one point, and so many people that were wasted, and it was hard work, but that was the culture. And I'm interested in where that culture comes from. Like, in terms of, again, in the 90s, early 2000s, it's almost as if drinks were marketed towards young people with Blue Wicked and the Alka-Pops. And it, for me, like on your journey, where have you found that this actually stems from?
I think a lot of it kind of comes from the alcohol industry that we don't even realise, like the marketing that goes into it. And, like you said, with WKDs and things like that, there was a big recruitment drive to get more young women drinkers because they realised women weren't drinking as much as men. And it was kind of marketed it to us in a way that felt really good because it kind of came from this like feminist angle of, women can do exactly what the men can do. They can drink as much as the men. They can be as laddish as the men. So it actually kind of came from like a really good place. But it actually came at a detriment to us. The actual alcohol of that movement came to a detriment. When you look at the stats since the 90s, addiction rates have been rising, heart disease, cancer, all in young women, because our bodies actually don't like metabolize alcohol in the same way that men do. So we're actually at a disadvantage already because of our bodies and our genetic makeup. We've got less of like an enzyme that men have got as well. So it's actually proven that, it can have more of a detrimental impact on our bodies than men really. But it was kind of sold to us as this really like empowering thing. And for me, that's what it felt like at the beginning, like I can do what men can do. I can go out and I can be loud and I can be raucous. But really, it actually became quite, I would say, like disempowering by the end of it, because then it kind of got a bit of a grip on me, really, where I couldn't live without it. And that's not empowering, that you can't go out on a night out without drinking. And I think the same has been true of this like mummy wine culture that we're seeing. Because this originally, again, came from a really good place, because when kind of social media first boomed, there was this like onslaught of, like perfect mummy bloggers who were sort of doing everything, colour coordinated lunch boxes and things like that. And actually then there was a kind of pushback against that from these like real mummy bloggers that said, like actually it's not as easy as they're making out. This is what it's really like. Here's me at 4 o'clock having a gin because I'm so stressed. And it came from this like really pure movement of actually, the world isn't perfect and we are stressed as mums. But now it's kind of morphed into this like parody of itself of like mummy needs her wine and mummy juice, and then brands capitalize on that, and then you've got the merch, and then you've got wine brands called Mummy Juice, and it's kind of, as soon as people see like an opportunity to market something, they just run with it. So it's now become this like ridiculous narrative, which unfortunately started in a good place, the same way women being able to drink as much as men came from like a great feminist empowering stance, but unfortunately it's just transpired that that's not the case now.
And it seems to me like that's all about being part of a club and being part of a movement. So like if you're in that mummy group and, you know, you're kind of all mums together, and if you're in that kind of group of, yeah, we can take on the lads, it's all being part of a tribe. And I think this is what's been really interesting with watching what you've done with the sobriety movement, is you've created a new tribe that is actually really gaining momentum. I mean, I've had various conversations with different people about drinking culture and, you know, drinking especially in their 40s because they're going into perimenopause, and so the histamine doesn't work properly like with the wine and stuff, and so they're having to look at different ways of consuming alcohol. But a lot of people are worried to step away from it because then they don't belong anywhere. And do you think that that's what you found when you were first kind of, what made you actually put your journey on social media?
Yeah, so it was pretty much for that reason, because I think it doesn't matter how supportive other people are. Sometimes they don't get it. And I always liken it to, you know, like if you're the only single one in a friendship group and all your friends are married, they can be nice and they can be supportive and they can say all the right things, but they don't get it. They don't get what it's like to be the single one and dating, things like that. And I think it's exactly the same with not drinking. Like my friends, albeit a bit ambivalent at the start of it, by the end became really supportive, but they just didn't get it. I couldn't talk to them about, oh, you know, how do you go to a date and do it without drinking? What is the best non-alcoholic wine? They didn't just get those things. So I kind of thought, well, there must be people out there like me. And I think when I first stopped drinking, I didn't know anything about AA. And I've got lots of friends who have been through the program and I know a lot more about it now. But when I first stopped drinking, I thought, you know, if I go there, it's going to be 60-year-old men and they're going to laugh at me when I say I can go a few weeks without drinking. But when I do drink, I can't stop and I make a fool of myself, and it's really affecting my anxiety. So I didn't go to AA, but I felt like I needed to meet people like me. And I looked on the internet and I couldn't find a lot. I found some recovery groups and I found, you know, some people who were talking about mummy wine culture. But I was this like 26-year-old British girl. A lot of the groups were kind of like based in America as well, who all my friends were still going to bottomless brunch every week. Like I was going on hen dos and things like that. And I just thought, I can't find anyone like me. And I followed loads of groups at the time that kind of had like a shared purpose, you know, whether they were talking about diet culture or body positivity or things like that. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if there was something where, you know, we could just talk about not drinking and share advice and tips and maybe meet up and go for mocktails. And I never in a million years thought it would become like my full-time job. I literally just thought it was going to be like me, a couple of other people, we'd chat, maybe we'd meet up. And it just escalated. And I think it's just because there wasn't anything like it really. And I think people just instantly gravitated to finding other people who were like them because there hadn't been a space before for young women to kind of meet and talk about it.
And do the things that young women want to do. You know, something that I really resonated with when I was reading up on some of your research was this culture of it within social culture in like television and Sex and the City and cocktails and, as you said, bottomless brunches, and every episode having the cocktails, the star, and Ab Fab with, you know, Patsy and Adina with their bottle of champagne, and the glamour that comes with drinking and the femininity that comes with drinking. And even when you go back to like old movies in the 30s and 40s and they've got a martini glass, and it's just this very glamorous kind of opulent version that you feel like you're stepping into when you go on like bottomless brunches and things and everybody gets dressed up. And it's how being part of that same group minus the alcohol, which is going to kind of give you, like you've said before, you know, serious anxiety, and feeling confident in those situations. And is that something that you are trying to kind of replicate with your meetups?
Yeah, I think so. And I always say, so the meetups are for people who, you know, even if you're not sober, even if you're just sober curious, or you just want to do some things that don't revolve around alcohol, because we find a lot of people come and they say, you know, like, actually, I still do drink, but I really am sober curious and I want to do new things that don't revolve around alcohol. So we're like, cool, like, come, just like, we just want to show people that you can have fun and you can do all those things without alcohol. And in my experience, I find like that glamour that we've kind of like been sold really, a bottomless brunch, in my experience, lasts for the first 10 minutes when we're all really dressed up. Then, you know, an hour later, someone's throwing up in a Bellini jug, someone's like crying about something that happened years ago. That glamour doesn't last. But for me, as like a non-drinker, I kind of find it lasts a lot longer because, you know, I'm composed, I'm enjoying myself, I'm having a laugh, I'm clear-headed, I'm dressed up, I'm like, you know, my lipstick isn't smeared all over my face. So my goal is just really to show people that you can do all those things and they can be as fun. And I think such a common misconception that we've got as well is that, you know, when you go out, people are like, oh, I just need a drink and then I'll relax and I'll feel comfortable. But what you see when you come to one of our brunches is like people still ease into situations. We give that credit to alcohol, but I don't think it deserves it because it's actually just naturally we ease into situations. When everyone gets there, yeah, they are a bit awkward and, you know, most people come on their own. So the first 10 minutes, everyone's like not really sure what they're doing. And then an hour later, we can't get people to stop talking. They're just so chatty and they're so like, and I think we give that credit to alcohol. So I just kind of want to show people actually, you know, give it a go. And maybe you'll see that you're giving so much credit to alcohol. And we run dance classes and things like that. And people get there and they go, oh, I'm really nervous. I couldn't dance and move my body without alcohol. And we're like, look, just give it a go. And then an hour later, they're like, I'm loving this. And they're like twerking. And I think it's just, we never give ourselves that opportunity to see if we could survive without alcohol. So it's kind of like an experiment, really.
And it is quite scary because, like, I mean, oh gosh, I'm so guilty of this. Like, that power, that alcohol that makes you feel less nervous, less self-conscious, you know. And I mean, I don't drink at all when I'm working because I'm just like, I need to be in complete control of everything so that when I'm not working, I do love to have a glass of wine with the girls, you know, and I really enjoy it. However, like you, in my much younger years, that has, you know, spiraled out of control with my friends. And then there are things that you can't remember and then you're trying to piece it all together. And then that chips away at your self-confidence. And then you create a version of yourself that is not very nice. And if you keep doing that pattern and that learned behavior then really starts to affect your self-confidence over time. So I think it's about kind of learning, isn't it? How to find your confidence in a situation without going to alcohol. So overall, when we're teaching kids and we're teaching teenagers, it's like if you're going into a new situation, what are the tools need to be taught at that level? Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well, though, it's because people always say to me, oh, like, what advice would you give to someone? And I think a lot of it is time and practice, because I think alcohol is synthetic confidence. So, you know, if you're going on a date or something, you're not feeling very confident, you grab a drink, you neck it, and then you're like, oh, okay, cool, I feel more confident. But then the next day, that confidence is gone because that literally came from a bottle, you drank it, and now it's not there. When you do those things without alcohol, you, I think, build this like innate confidence within yourself. So if I go on a sober day, I do it, I'm a bit nervous, I get through it and I go, okay, that was fine, you know, like I didn't die, it wasn't like setting myself on fire, I'm okay, I've done it. And then that's like a good tick, and I build this like little confidence within me. And so then the next time I've got that in my locker of, you know, last time actually it was fine and I did it without a drink, and I've just kept building on it. So it's not a thing where I can be like, actually this is what you do straight away to have confidence without alcohol. I think it's just a thing that you just keep doing, you keep practicing, and then over time you'll start building a real confidence that doesn't have to come from a bottle. Like I'm more confident now because I can go into social situations and don't need a drink. I'm more confident as a non-drinker than I ever was as a drinker because I was always relying on alcohol for my confidence. So I think it is really hard because everyone wants like easy kind of solutions. And there are things that I would do, like, you know, like if I'm going on a night out, I'll put on a playlist that makes me feel really confident. Like I won't sit there listening to like depressing music. I'll wear something that I know I'm like really comfortable in. Like if I'm like, oh, this is a bit tight, or I always used to go out, and if I wasn't that confident, so I'd think, oh, well, it's fine because after a few glasses of wine, I won't care. But now I like always wear things I'm comfortable in, and I go to places that I know that I'm going to be comfortable in. I know that they're going to have good like non-alcoholic selection. I go to things that I enjoy. I don't go to things that I think, oh God, that's going to be really stressful. So I think it's like a lot of those things, but I think on the whole it is really just like keep doing it until you build that confidence within yourself, until you prove to yourself that you can actually do things without alcohol.
And how do you deal with it on dates? Because this is a really interesting one. Like how, when you've been on a date and you've said, I imagine watching First Dates, and you go, oh, I'm so sober. Like, how does the other person often react?
Yeah, so I always, because I'm an internet dater, I would always tell them beforehand, because I just think some people will react negatively to it, like it is life. And I would rather not get on the date and then tell them, and then they're like, oh, and they're weird about it, and then I feel weird. So I always give them the option to be like, yeah, that's not for me. And I have to say that I was surprised. I thought half the people would be like, that's a no, but I would say like 95% of people are so okay with it, and some people are even like quite in awe of it, like they think, oh wow, she's got the confidence to like go on a date sober, like that's quite attractive. Like I thought everyone would just think I was boring, and I was so surprised. So I always get it out of the way first. I always try and hint that I'd like to do something like an activity of some sort, because I just think rather than sitting opposite someone, even if it's like bowling or going for a walk somewhere, or just something where there's like more stimulus and things that you can talk about, I think is always a good one. I think especially if you live in a city, there's like so many fun things that you can do these days on dates. So I always try and suggest things like that. But most people, I just get it out there early. And if they say, you know, like, oh, do you want to go for a drink? I just say, yeah, I'd love to, but just so you know, I don't drink, or like, yeah, or mine will be a lemonade if that's all right. And some people will ask and be like, oh, how come? And some people will just kind of leave it. But I really did think that there would be a lot more people who were funny about it. And I think even like over the last 4 years, I've had a period of like dating, then being in a relationship, then dating again. From when I first started dating sober, people definitely, I don't think, were as like open to it as they are now. I think even in the last 4 years, that conversation has changed dramatically. The most recent time that I've been dating, everyone seems to be fine about it, and everyone seems to know someone as well, like, oh yeah, my cousin's a non-drinker, or oh yeah, my flatmate's not drinking at the moment. So I think it is becoming a lot more normalized.
I think it is breaking up that cycle, isn't it? Like, even if you don't, like, you're not fully sober, but you're more sober curious, or you have periods of time where you refrain from alcohol. I think for me, the thing that I often find, like if I choose to not drink, or I choose to drink very little when I'm going out with the girls, it's that I'm going to be the judgy one, that I'm going to be judging people. And therefore people get a bit angsty about that. Like they want to be able to be wild. And it's a bit unnerving that there is somebody that can witness everything. And I think it's breaking that down as well, isn't it? And kind of having trust with those friends.
Yeah, and again, I think so many of these things just take time. Like at the start, my friends were exactly the same. They were like, "Oh God, you're going to be like CCTV on the night out. Like you're going to tell us, like, don't tell us the next day." And it took like a while, and then now they're just like, they don't care. They'll get as drunk as they want around me. They know I'm not judging them. And I think as well, like I just had honest conversations with them and said, "Look, like it's really fun to get that drunk. I know, because you've seen me, but it's not fun for me anymore, and I'm really suffering because of it. I don't judge you at all. If anything, I'm jealous that like you can all drink and then not suffer the next day like I seem to." Just having those like honest conversations, I think, was such a key part of it as well. And you know, just we have this really weird thing that we think that non-drinkers are automatically going to be like judgy people, or it makes me feel really awkward because people will be like, "Oh, sorry that I'm drinking around you." I'm like, it's absolutely fine. And then I want to get pictures out of me being like really drunk on the floor and be like, I'm not doing it because I'm on some like health kick and I think it's really bad for you. I'm doing it because it was just really affecting my life negatively. So but I think once people know me, and
that's the thing, it's having accountability, because that was one of the reasons I wanted to really cut back, was because like you, I suffer really badly from anxiety.
Yeah.
And if I drank too much, the way my body processes alcohol is that it goes into like overdrive with adrenaline.
Yeah.
And that would make me feel so unbelievably anxious, and I just couldn't cope with it, because I'd be thinking I've got nothing to feel anxious, and you'd have all your friends going, "Oh, you didn't do anything, but you didn't do anything. You were lovely, but you didn't do anything. You sat in the chair and you chatted and you were lovely." And I was like,
yeah.
And I like, for example, because I'd already been cutting back, I can remember all that and I could remember everything, but there's still the physical impact of the way my body personally, you know, like processed alcohol. I was just like, I cannot deal with this. I've done nothing wrong, and yet I feel like I'm being tortured. And so I do, you know, I'm not going to say that I don't drink, because I do. I love a glass of wine, or I'll have a glass of wine with my husband, or, you know, a couple with the girls. But whereas before, when we were younger, that drinking culture, the hen do's, the baby showers, the girls' nights, you know, on those particular occasions, I am much, much, much more aware of kind of what's going on, and and sitting back a bit and not getting into that cycle of let's pop open the Prosecco. I'm like, I'll buy my own drinks, thanks.
Yeah.
Just because it's that thing of going, you know, I need to be accountable for me, because you'll all wake up tomorrow morning and you might feel a bit sick or you might feel a bit tired, but you won't feel like me.
Yeah.
And I can totally relate to that, and could relate to it when you were talking about, you know, coming to that conclusion of going, I just physically and mentally don't want to put myself in that position anymore.
Yeah.
Because I read it was like you'd read that you'd thrown a burrito out of an Uber, and even though you'd felt like I'd been in way worse situations than that, it was like that was the killer. That was the one that you were like, no, I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. I woke up next morning and my friend was like, you were on one last night. She was like, I was really in the middle of enjoying my burrito, and because we dragged you home, she was like, you just not having any of it. She said, you just took my burrito and you just threw it out the Uber window. And it was just like, it was such a silly, stupid thing, but I was like, who does that? I was like, who does things like that? And they said as well, when you left the club, some girl was wearing a hat and you just grabbed it off her head. And I was like, oh my God, I'm mortified. Like, just silly things. I was like, oh, I wouldn't do that sober. But like I always say, I think with the judgy thing as well, people think of it like, you know, like say, oh, you've turned vegan, then they think, oh, you're going to be judging meat eaters. But the way I see it is more like, oh, I can't eat, you know, bread because I'm a celiac. So it's I'm really jealous of people that can do it. But for me, like, it's just a no-go, and I've kind of accepted that. And there's not a judgment there. I don't think I'm better than anyone. So, and it's like you were saying as well about you still like to drink. Again, I don't judge anyone that still likes to drink. And I think, because I always wish now that I don't know if I'd wanted to have called it Sober Girl Society, because I just really want to help people be more mindful about their relationship with alcohol. I don't think everyone in the world needs to stop dead tomorrow. I'm not like, you know, preaching total abstinence for everyone. I've got a lot of friends that can just, you know, take or leave drinking, but I think it's just about being more mindful, getting rid of this kind of like default drinking culture of everyone is expected to drink at every social occasion, and also the kind of like binge drinking culture of not even drinking because it's enjoyable, just drinking to get absolutely blackout drunk because you're not dealing with actually things that might be going on. I think they're the kind of things that I want to tackle, but it's really hard because as soon as you start talking, like if I came on this podcast and started saying actually running was really good for my mental health, no one would say, oh God, she's so judgmental and annoying and preachy. But as soon as I say actually I stopped drinking, it was the best thing I've ever done for my mental health, people are like, oh, give it a rest. Like,
but I disagree. I actually think, as you said, I think the tide is turning, and I think that's why, like for me, I was really excited about you coming on the podcast, because I was going, I know that there's a lot of people who are really wanting to make the move towards a more sober, conscious life, even if it's not completely cutting out drinking, it's just cutting down, and again fighting against that culture of, without being, you know, the Geordie Shore culture, the university culture, the culture that you get sucked into very early on, and showing women in particular that you can have really healthy female friendships that don't revolve around drinking. And, you know, there might be the odd occasion where you do want to celebrate something or whatever. It's just the fact that it's not the be all and end all. And I think for us growing up, it didn't feel like that. It felt like if you didn't, you were the odd one out and you weren't part of the gang. So now that you are really flying the flag, I think is a fantastic thing. And I think, you know, it definitely makes me feel like more for my son and like younger people, younger girls, that they won't fall into a trap of feeling that they have to drink. Because one of the other things that I think is very worrying is the relationship between sex and alcohol with women. And, you know, young women particularly falling into that spiral of, well, you have to drink to kind of be sexy or to have sex. And then, you know, you could account for so many young relationships or, you know, even pregnancies that have happened because of that drinking culture. And if it wasn't so widely accepted at a young age, and it was a bit more kind of debatable, I think there'd be a lot of young women that possibly wouldn't go down that avenue and then have quite low self-worth as they get older. Do you think?
Yeah, 100%. And you know, because of my drinking in kind of that space, I definitely had low self-worth. I would definitely go out and, you know, wake up and be like, why have I done this? Like, this is, and I think even things like, you know, the lines of consent get really blurry. It's such a big issue. Like, I was blacking out and waking up and being like, I don't remember, like maybe I did consent, maybe I don't. And then there's this whole like grey area, and that really plays with your self-esteem. And I've spoken to so many people now who have had really similar encounters that I have, but at the time it was like oh, I don't want to talk to anyone about this because it's like really awkward and I don't know kind of like where the lines are. So I think it's a subject that kind of needs to be spoken about more, and the role that alcohol can play in things like sexual violence or even like domestic violence and things like that. We don't talk about it enough, because as soon as we start talking about those issues, people are like, oh, I don't want to hear about alcohol, it's really preachy, like, but you're right, I do think the tide is turning, and I think especially kind of women, I think, are leading this charge. I think every time I write an article and it gets posted on Twitter, all the comments that are like, oh, what a snowflake, she's so boring. Always from men, always older men, like 50-year-old men, like, oh God, this generation, they don't know how to have fun. You're like, oh, go away.
Well, you needed a drink to have fun, mate, yeah. That's slightly, it's not quite together. But I think the other thing, though, that I do find slightly worrying is that although there is like, and I can see it across the younger generation, that there is kind of this move away from drinking, there is a rise in drug culture. So it's kind of, is one vice being swapped for another? What do you think on that?
Yeah, I do think, and the stats are kind of showing that as well. And I mean, I've been watching Euphoria lately, and I think that is very dangerous for glamorizing a lot of like drug issues. I think it's very realistic, but I think it might be quite dangerous. I think people are kind of realizing that like alcohol is not the best drug, and I think it's been argued for a while that alcohol makes you kind of like sloppy and hazy and not remember things, and I think actually for that reason they're steering more towards like cannabis or benzodiazepines and things like that. So I think that's something that we really need to keep an eye on. I think a lot of people are cutting down, but I think in that generation, yeah, a lot of them are turning to things like that maybe don't have the same after effects the next day. I think it'd be really interesting to see how that develops, but I think it is quite worrying.
I agree with you, and it's something that again with the cocaine use and that being more widespread, and it you're not necessarily like with alcohol, people will be worrying about putting weight on even, and the effects like that it has in that capacity, whereas it can go completely the other way with drug use. And I do think that there is still, when it comes down to it, it's clearly a need for some kind of escapism that's been facilitated there. So it, for me, makes me think, well, really, it needs to start with building up young people's self-worth and building up people's self-confidence and having those lessons taught really early on in schools about how to be confident, like what we said at the beginning, giving young people a toolkit that doesn't rely on a vice or on escapism, but actually being present and in the moment.
Yeah, oh, completely. And like, that's what it was for me, because I used to suffer really badly with anxiety and depression, and I talk about it in the book that like the only time that I didn't feel like sad or anxious was when I was drinking. For me, it was like, I'm such an overthinker, I've got such a busy mind, and drinking for me was just like switching that off, and it was the only time that I was like relaxed. Whereas if I'd had those tools to know how to relax outside of drinking, know how to unwind and know how to deal with my feelings, if I'd gone to therapy and understood all those things, I wouldn't have needed that escapism. And this is what I say about the like judgment thing. Everyone's got their form of escapism, whether that's scrolling on social media, whether that's like binge watching 10 episodes of Selling Sunsets. For me it was drinking, and for someone else it's something different. So there's no judgment, it's just that my escapism method actually used to be quite harmful to me. So now, I'm more likely to binge watch 10 episodes of Selling Sunset, and that actually doesn't have the after effects for me the next day. And like, we do need escapism. It is really important, especially in such a like busy world where we're constantly on, our phones are always on. We do need escapism, but it's when that turns into like avoidance. And that's what I think I was doing with my drinking. Is it started as escapism, it was fun, and then after that it was like, oh well, actually I'm feeling really shit, I don't want to deal with that, so I'm going to get drunk instead. And then I just avoided dealing with any of my mental health issues because I would just drink through them. And I think that's the kind of like fine line is between escapism and avoidance.
And if for somebody that is wanting to cut down, what can you tell them? Like, what steps can they take that is relatively like easy to follow, or how did you do it?
Yeah, I think the first thing I always say to people is understand why you're drinking, because so many of us don't even question that. We go, well, I drink because other people do. Okay, yeah, but why? Like, does it make you feel relaxed? Does it make you feel more confident? And like, then dig into that. So I always say, like, if you say, oh, well, I can't have fun without alcohol. Okay, well, why? Well, because that's all I've ever known. Okay, well, why? Oh, because it was taught to me when I was young. Okay, well, when you were young, did you have fun without alcohol? Well, yeah. So it's like really go into that and understand, because there's normally a root thing, a reason why you drink, whether that's because you want to be part of the group, like you don't want to feel left out because you feel like actually people like you more if you drink, you know, you feel like you're funnier. Get into that kind of like root cause of what is it that you drink, and maybe like take some steps to work on that. If it's you drink for confidence, okay, maybe read some books on confidence, maybe take some seminars on public speaking or whatever it is. I think there's more of a root cause. I think that's like one of the first things is to identify, and then just ask yourself the other questions, like where, like are there places that make me drink more? Is it like, oh, you know, if I go to a football game, do I instantly associate that with drinking? And even like who makes me drink more? Is it actually, you know, whenever I spend time with these family members, they're always asking me, when are you going to get married? And that really stresses me out. So then I want to turn to alcohol. Like try and identify those kind of things, I think is the first thing. And this is kind of the concept of like mindful drinking or sober curiosity, which are kind of interchangeable, which is just getting more mindful, more curious about your relationship with alcohol. Why do you drink? When do you drink? Who do you drink with? I think that's the best place to start, is to kind of interrogate. I always say some people might want to journal, some people might just want to think about it. I think that's always a good place to start. And then just look around for, like, there's a whole corner of the internet dedicated to this now. There's like books, there's podcasts, there's documentaries, like whatever way you like to consume your information, there's something out there. There's courses, there's coaches, anything out there that can help you change your relationship with alcohol. So I think just like start looking at that. And I think even breaking up your social media feed, because otherwise it's just cocktails, people drinking, people out all the time. Just start kind of filtering some more, even if you don't want to go like to sober accounts necessarily, find influencers that you like that don't necessarily drink, or their world doesn't revolve around drinking, and kind of filter them into your feed.
I think the other thing that's quite frightening for people when they are moving away from drink is what to drink when they're out. That for me, my husband barely drinks at all, and has always kind of never really drunk whilst we've been together. And he always complains of the fact that even though the market is getting better, there is still not that one drink that you can have that you feel like you just really want. Like, you just don't want 10 Coca-Colas. And even the beer thing, you know, the like Beck's Blue and stuff, is like, well, I don't actually want to drink the beer, because then I'm just, especially from a weight perspective, it's like, what's the point? But then you don't want to have coffee and you don't want to have tea, and it's like, we need this drink that's just not kind of alcohol fueled. And would you say that was kind of the same for you at the time?
Yeah, I think so. When I first stopped drinking as well, it was literally like Beck's Blue, and that was it. I think now there are so many good ones, and the supermarkets are really good, but I still don't think it's filtered into like your kind of, not like bog standard, but you know, you're like everyday boozer. I don't think that they've gone into them yet. Like if you go into a lot like cocktail bars, or even some of the like bigger chains, like the all bar ones, the Slug and Lettuce, that you can tell that they are making more of an effort now with their kind of like low and no menus. But if you're just going to your like local pub, it's not kind of seeped in yet. But I always encourage everyone to like have those conversations. So like I was in Dublin and I asked behind the bar if they had any non-alcoholic beer, and he was like, oh, we have just got one in. He was like, actually, I'd really love to get your thoughts. He had no idea what I did. He was like, do you drink a lot of non-alcoholic beer? And we had a big conversation, and he was like, oh, because I don't really know like what people like or what I should be stocking. And we were talking for ages. And it's just that a lot of these bars don't really know what people want to drink non-alcohol. So if you can say to them, actually, you know, like I come here quite a lot, if you maybe think about getting this drink in, or it's only going to benefit them, it's only going to help them with their business. And like I always say, if I go to a pub, if they've got a good non-alcoholic spirit and mixer, I'll pay like £6 for it, you know. Yeah. But if not, I'm getting a Diet Coke, and that's like £2. They're going to make more money out of me by like getting one of those things. So you're only really helping them. So I think where you can, like, try and encourage like your locals to get more non-alcoholic stuff.
And what do you order when you're out?
It totally depends. If they've got a good selection, I love a good like alcohol-free cocktail, but it depends where you go, because some places will be like juice.
Just juice, yeah. And it's like, oh, I don't want to drink like 3 of these.
Yeah, but some places will be like really fancy. It will have like a non-alcoholic spirit in it. Like if there's somewhere that does like a spirit and tonic, I'll normally have that. Even though I do love a ginger ale, and I
was going to say that I had that when I was pregnant. Ginger ale and what was it, like a tonic type thing? But yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think it's quite an underrated soft drink. It's not like Diet Coke and you can't drink loads of them, and it's got a bit of a fiery kick. So I feel like it's a bit more of an adult drink. So like if you can't find anything, that would be my go-to. But if they've got like a spirit and tonic, or I do like alcohol-free beers, Beck's Blue, not so much, but there's a lot of really good ones, and especially a lot of like craft independent ones. Just unfortunately, you can't really get them in pubs, but there's some really good websites that you can like get like non-alcoholic drinks on now. So I always say like experiment, have fun with it. It's actually quite nice to like go down a supermarket and like get a few different ones, try them.
I think the mindful drinking movement is really good as well. Like, so for example, like with my husband, if he does go out ever, he'll kind of have a beer and then have either a sparkling water or a Beck's Blue. And then we'll end up only having 2 drinks instead of 4. And I think that's a really good way to kind of start to cut down. I mean, I love sparkling water anyway. I love it. So that's my go-to, is kind of having maybe a glass of wine and then a sparkling, just so again, you're breaking down that cycle of drink after drink after drink, and before you've even realised it, you've drank so much. Whereas if you've got the 2 drinks almost on the go, it kind of helps to just lessen the effects. Do you think?
Yeah, one of the like premises, so Club Soda have got a book called How to Be a Mindful Drinker, and one of their kind of premises is that you wait and see how the drink makes you feel before moving on to the next one, which I think is a classic error for many of us. You'll have got halfway through a drink and then someone will go, oh, do you want another one? You go, yeah, go on then. So before you've even kind of recognised how that alcohol is making you feel, you've already moved on to the next one. So that's like immediate rule number 1 is finish your drink, wait a little bit, then get your next one. Don't plow on straight through. That's like a big thing, I think, with mindful drinking. So yeah, definitely.
And do you think that we saw like 6.5 million Brits signed up to Dry January in 2021? Do you think that there will come a time in the quite near future where drinking will almost be seen like, well, alcohol consumption will be seen in the same kind of way as smoking, in that it'll really start to become a bit more frowned upon, and we will start moving away from that culture?
Yeah, I don't think it'll go as far as smoking. I think it'll be more like probably veganism, where it's really widely accepted. Mm-hmm. Everywhere's got like different options and caters to it, and you could say it and people won't really question it. Or I don't know if we'll demonize it to the point of smoking. I think it's so ingrained in our culture, a lot more than smoking was. I think it goes back years and years and years, like medieval times of how we used to bond. I think they're not in our lifetime. I don't think it'll get. I
mean, even in biblical times, if you go with Christian faith, then Jesus turned water into wine. So.
Exactly. We've got a lot more, whereas smoking, hasn't been around as long as that. So I think there'd be a lot to get it to that point. But I definitely think it will be that not drinking becomes really socially acceptable at some point.
And before we finish up, what are your plans now with like the Sober Girl Society? What do you want to do with it next?
The thing I love most about it is the like real life meetups, especially I think, so we've had like 2 years of like not really being able to do them and see people in real life. For me, they were just like, sounds really silly, but like so magical to just see people. Like they come in, they're really nervous, and then they leave with like 5 friends and they're like, oh, we're all going to meet up next week. And I'm like, this is lovely.
Yeah.
Just like doing those over like, as I want to get as far across the UK as possible, because we tend to do them London, Manchester. So I want to try and get like Scotland, Wales. Like I want to try and do as far reaching as possible. I think that's the like main goal for this year, because we've had 2 years of everything's been online. So I just want to like get out and see as many people as possible, but just keep getting people to the platform who aren't necessarily thinking about complete abstinence, who just want to understand a little bit more about their drinking. Like that would just be the dream, really.
Oh, you're doing an amazing job with it. Honestly, I think it's so fantastic. And I really think it's so helpful for those of us that genuinely do suffer really badly, especially with the after effects, and that need to feel like we're not weird or anything else. It's amazing to see all these other people that are like you. So thank you so much for it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me and letting me tell people about it.
No, that's fine. I mean, we have run out of time for today, but thank you for being with me. It's been absolutely amazing to chat to you.
Oh, thank you.
If you'd like to find out more about the Sober Girl Society, then please head to www.sobergirlsociety.com, and you can also keep up with Millie's journey by following her on Instagram at Millie Gooch. For more well-being, fashion and beauty, don't forget you can visit us at our website, www.thecapsule.co.uk. You can also catch up with our previous podcast episodes by visiting the In Conversation page and subscribing to any of our podcast channels and YouTube. Please do feel free to leave your rate and reviews. I would love to hear from you as the series goes on. You can also drop us a message at our Instagram at Official Capsule if you'd like to put any questions to our future guests or leave a message about our current episodes. I will be back next week with another fabulous guest and more conversations of inspiration. But today, all that's left for us to say is goodbye. So it's goodbye from Millie.
Bye.
And goodbye from me. This episode of The Capsule in Conversation was brought to you by Harrogate Spring Water. Bottled at source, Harrogate Spring offers a pure, refreshing taste with a delicate blend of naturally occurring minerals and electrolytes, perfect for healthy hydration.